Okay, so hi everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for our Welcoming Economies webinar, partnering with local economic development players. We're so excited that you're here, and so thank you so much. During today's webinar, we will be covering the following. So we will do our welcome and introductions. We'll have some opening remarks. We'll have a panel discussion. We'll do a breakout discussion, and then we'll report out, share some resources and some future events. So today's objectives include understanding why partnering with local and state economic development organizations, chambers of commerce, and business groups can really expand the opportunities in your work in your community. Learn how to approach these partners to build meaningful relationships and partnerships, and get useful advice to navigate challenges that you might be experiencing or fear that you might have in this area. And we have a panel of amazing practitioners who will dive deeper into some of their experiences. So next, I'd like to get or share a little more information about Welcoming America before we fully dive in. So Welcoming America is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that leads a movement of inclusive communities becoming more prosperous by ensuring everyone belongs. We believe that all people, including immigrants, are valued contributors and vital to the success of our communities and shared future. The Welcoming Network is composed of over 300 nonprofits and local governments working to build more inclusive and welcoming communities in the United States and abroad. Led by Welcoming America, the Welcoming Network is both a network and a movement driven by the conviction that communities make better decisions when residents of all backgrounds, identities, and perspectives are meaningfully engaged. So one of the tools that we use and that really kind of roots a lot of the work that we do is the Welcoming Standard, which captures the core of what it means to be an inclusive community. And so it was developed in collaboration with local governments, advocates, and diverse experts, and with input from the community and public at large. The Welcoming Standard provides a comprehensive roadmap for immigrant inclusion and welcoming work. The standard addresses a range of essential policies and programs, from language access to hiring practices. And so the Welcoming Standard is organized by our framework categories, which include government and community leadership, civic engagement, equitable access, education, connected communities, economic development, and safe communities. And so all that to say, we really wanted to dive into one area of the Welcoming Standard that's relevant to the Welcoming Economies program and the reason why we're all here today, which is economic development. And so you can see these are 6 of the indicators within the economic development framework that really relate back to the work that we all do in inclusive economic development. A lot of these help to ensure that programs support entrepreneurship, business development, and workforce development while establishing accessibility to all residents, including immigrants. Yeah, so I will pass it over to Steve Tabachman.
Great. It's exciting to be here. I'm the executive director at Global Detroit. We're a regional economic development initiative that focuses on immigrant inclusion, and we run programs around talent and opportunity neighborhoods, communications, and research that are making sure immigrants are at the forefront of our economic development strategies. And we've worked with Welcoming America for almost a decade now on building out the programming around the welcoming economies and the economic development. So I'm really excited for today's webinar because my background's in the nonprofit sector. I started in community economic development work almost 30 years ago now. And I served in the state legislature working on a variety of economic development issues, representing a large Latinx community with a sizable immigrant population. I was a fighter for immigrant rights in the state legislature. And when I came out, I was approached by the New Economy Initiative, a philanthropic effort, and told, we want to include immigrants in our economic strategies. And so together we set forth what became Global Detroit. But early on, we formed a partnership with our regional chamber of commerce, who was interested at that time in really highly skilled immigrant talent. And we, in fact, ended up being housed at the chamber for the first almost 4 or 5 years of Global Detroit's history. And what I've come to appreciate over the last a little more than a decade of work around welcoming economies is how powerful it is to partner with local economic development agencies, chambers of commerce, state economic development agencies, and folks in the business community. Even if your history and outgrowth is as a social service agency, an immigrant service agency, refugee resettlement agency, or a welcoming initiative, these can be really important partners that can bring new resources, and that ultimately, if we're going to build a welcoming America, if we're going to make those kinds of substantive, profound, lasting changes, we're going to need to move large organizations and institutions who maybe in the past have only seen immigration as a human rights issue or a social justice issue, and help them understand that it is that they can be inclusive in their economic development strategies as a mainstream issue, and that they will get better results for their own chamber, for their own economic strategies by being inclusive. As Angela Glover Blackwell from is proud of saying, like, inclusion is good, an economic strategy. So I butchered her quote, but I apologize. But with that, let's move to the next slide, and we're going to start today's session with really a discussion from a panel of experts from 2 cities, St. Louis and Pittsburgh, where there have been really great partnerships between welcoming initiatives and local economic development agencies. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and then I will be sort of the moderator for a panel discussion. With us today are Betsy Cohen, who is the founding executive director at the St. Louis Mosaic Project, which is a program of the nonprofit World Trade Center St. Louis, which is housed in the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. The Mosaic Project is a public-private partnership whose goal is to attract, retain international people to the St. Louis area. Betsy has an extensive corporate career in marketing at Nestle Purina before leading the St. Louis Mosaic Project. In her corporate career, she's one of the first women to be named a vice president, and she worked on national and international business issues. Next is Jeffrey Soyantent, who is a native of Kenya. Jeffrey Soyantent moved to St. Louis 16 years ago after graduating from college in Nairobi, Kenya. He's the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Vitendo for Africa. Vitendo's mission is to empower African immigrants through educational outreach and programs in Missouri. In Swahili, Vitendo means action. Vitendo for Africa exists to provide immigrant and refugee families with direct services and interconnected resources to improve their quality of life. Jeffrey holds, I believe, an undergraduate degree in economics and a master's of business administration. Next, we are joined by Fezola Akintola. I love this description. She's a foodie, a creative, an active community member, and the manager of the Office in Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, or OIRA, in the city of Pittsburgh. As a Nigerian American, Faya strongly values international collaboration and is always excited to learn how to build bridges across cultures. She holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of West Georgia, a dual master's degree, an MBA, as well as a master's in sustainability from Chatham University, a woman in leadership certificate from Coro Pittsburgh, and is currently pursuing her doctoral program in social and comparative analysis and education at the University of Pittsburgh. Finally, Jeremy Carter. Jeremy Carter has worked in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the past 12 years to advance affordable housing, homeless solutions, and cross-sector collaboration.
I can just call in on this on my phone and we can go to the dump if you want.
Cool. Guys, if you could please mute
your lines, please. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm going to start over. Jeremy's worked in Pittsburgh for 12 years on affordable housing, homeless solutions, cross-sector collaboration around health and housing, utilizing experience from nonprofits, local government, and healthcare. He was at the Urban Redevelopment Authority, or the URA of Pittsburgh, which is their regional economic development agency, where he led consumer programs for the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund with an emphasis on equity, language access, data-driven program development. And he worked with FAA and the city's Welcoming Pittsburgh office. Currently, Jeremy is manager of the housing strategy at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, or UPMC, helping to shape policy and program development around health and housing for Medicaid and Medicare beneficiaries all across Western Pennsylvania. So first of all, I want to thank very much our four panelists today. As you can see, I've had the opportunity to work with each of them in different capacities and just have an enormous amount of respect for the work that they do. But I think they have some great stuff to shed. So I'm going to start, and we're going to, I think, start in St. Louis first, and then we'll go to Pittsburgh. So I'm going to start with Betsy Cohen and really just ask, how did the Economic Development Agency in St. Louis originally get involved with sort of welcoming economies or immigrant inclusive economic development? And after that, I'll ask the same question for Faya.
Great. Well, there was research done. One of our philanthropists in town noted that we, as a region, only had close to 5% foreign-born people, and he actually got one of our foundations to commission research through the Kemper Foundation, which is affiliated with Commerce Bank here. And they did research in 2012 that said we are missing people because we only have 5% foreign-born when the national number is close to 14%. And other Midwest regions like Kansas City have 9%, Chicago's got 22%. So the question was, what is the value to our region in terms of if we could increase our population by adding more foreign-born people, they would bring population, economic benefit, they would fill jobs, they would pay taxes. So research was done in 2012 that showed the economic value that would be added if we could increase our foreign-born numbers. And on top of that, a second study was done in 2013 that kind of laid out a roadmap that said, what would you need to do? You'd need to keep more international students. You'd need to help foreign-born people find better jobs. You'd need to help immigrant entrepreneurs. You'd need to help the ethnic chambers of commerce be stronger and bond with our regular mainstream chambers of commerce. And this activity was funded through the World Trade Center, which is part of our regional economic development organization. And because of that, after these two studies were done, there was funding put together by the government, universities, our chambers, to actually fund the first position, which was mine, coming out of the corporate world, to really market our region to attract and retain international people who are in the United States. We can't give them visas, but really help grow this by making sure that we retain and attract and retain international students, foreign-born people that are coming through all of our different ethnicities, and then partner with many organizations in St. Louis that serve our immigrant community as well as our business community to bring them together for our economic gain. So that's the story, and it has been successful, and we have increasing numbers of partners.
So you guys really started with that economic impact and started housed in an economic development agency. Faya, what is the story in Pittsburgh? How did partnerships with the economic development, first of all, how did it all start? Then how did it partnerships with the economic development agencies evolve?
Okay, so when you ask how did Welcome in Pittsburgh start, how did that come about? And then the partnership, okay, just to be clear. Sorry, so when our mayor started his first term in the previous administration, so we just started a new mayor's term this year, but the previous administration, that was Mayor Peduto, Mayor William Peduto, and he was starting in 2014. My past predecessors ago came in actually as a nonprofit and faith-based kind of liaison. But the county, who had been doing the work a little bit longer in terms of engaging with immigrant and refugee communities, kind of reached out to my past predecessor and said, hey, there's this place called Welcome in America, and these are kind of the things that they're doing, and I think you guys want to be a part of it. So of course, my predecessor kind of, with the county, met up with Welcome in America to kind of find out what was going on across the country, what were things that were happening. And with that kind of partnership, and in talking with the mayor, they decided to enter into this, how do we create a roadmap, right? And I know that I came in years later down the line, but in talking and speaking and trying to get a better understanding of, okay, how did we come about? I think the heart of the mayor was, we know that the city of Pittsburgh was going through its new renaissance, right? It was this still city, was known for just being this dark place and so on and so forth. But now that there was this change with education, technology, and we were reinventing ourselves, we wanted to be intentional about making sure that immigrant and refugee communities were not left behind of this new renaissance. So of course, when it came to creating this roadmap, it became, okay, how do we have community conversations in different parts of the city? The mayor also selected 40 advisory council members that will work with the consultants to kind of scope out this roadmap, this action plan on how do we create a welcoming city, a city where people would come, live, and thrive, and not leave the city. And that's how the roadmap came about. And that launched in 2015. I came about a couple of years later in 2017, of course, inheriting the roadmap. And of course, my role was to kind of fulfill this roadmap. So in looking through it, there were a couple of things that stood out. It was how do we help build wealth for our immigrant communities? How do we help grow their businesses? And I was talking to our deputy chief at that time, like, okay, here was some plans, like how can you kind of help us? It was an initiative at that time. To kind of launch this forward. And he kind of said, hey, you know what? The URA, Urban Redevelopment Authority, is the economic development arm for the city, and that I should enter into conversation with the URA. And I kind of said, okay, great. I already was familiar with one of the executives at that time, so I reached out to her. And what was awesome was this pilot program that you, Steve, and Christina were working on, right? This economic development pilot program was coming about. So it was a great opportunity to say, hey, you know what? You guys have published data in the past that shows the kind of people you've engaged, and unfortunately, the immigrant communities are rarely on your annual reports. So this is really a great opportunity for us to kind of learn together, right, with expertise such as, of course, Welcome to America and Global Detroit would be leading us in partnership with other cities. We will enter into this pilot program together to kind of learn how do we engage immigrants in some of their programs. And she spoke and she invited other people. And as we were talking, she said, you know what, this is an area that we are yet to develop ourselves in. And yes, that they would be willing to enter into an application process with us. And that's how it kind of came about. And thankfully, we were selected in the process. And I know later down the line, Jeremy was brought in, and it kind of went from there. Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to reverse order here for the next question and turn to Jeremy to continue this story in Pittsburgh. So now this new partnership is formed with your organization at the time, the Urban Redevelopment Authority, or the URA, and the city's welcoming effort. And what resources, why should a group partner with an economic development agency? What did you bring to the work, and what were the benefits of being around? And then I'm going to ask Jeffrey the same question for St. Louis. What does an organization like Vitendo for Africa, serving African immigrants in the Missouri area, get from partnering with the St. Louis Mosaic Project? But I'll let Jeremy go first.
Yeah, so when Faye and her team approached us at the URA, it was right before COVID. So we had no idea at the time, of course, but I think we started in January and then it was March 2020. While before all of that happened, even when they first approached, I'll be very candid, as the redevelopment agency, we were just kind of like, what's in it for us, and having the initial conversations and planning discussions with the help of Welcome to America and Global Detroit, we were pretty easy to identify mutual goals. I don't know about you, Faye, but at first it didn't seem like we could find mutual goals. But I think through guided conversations, we pretty quickly found that we are serving the same communities, but we needed help at the redevelopment arm. There was distrust of the government. There were all these new programs coming out with COVID, and we went back to Welcoming Pittsburgh and Welcome America and said, there's a great opportunity coming with all of this relief funding and more programs. And this is a perfect opportunity for us to reevaluate how we're creating programs, how accessible our programs are, and really our approach to outreach. which historically has not been super great. So we really aligned on some of those goals and realized that as the redevelopment arm, we need more support and guidance on connecting the communities and making inroads so that we can serve more people, more communities, and help bridge trust, essentially. So we focus a lot on the housing side, but we also did work on the business development side as well, since they're both within the URA. So that's a very short version of kind of what our approach was, and initial glimpse into why it was beneficial for us to work with the pilot program.
So Jeffrey, I know you guys have worked, you're even on the advisory board for.
Yes.
Why an organization that's serving immigrants would want to partner with a big formal economic development agency that St. Louis Mosaic has housed?
Yeah, I think for us, I would say it has been great to work with the St. Louis Mosaic Project, particularly because as an organization, you have the population, you have the community, but they don't have the connections with the resources that are there within the city. And I think the economic development has the platform and all the network that we as an organization we need. So St. Louis Mosaic Project has played a big role in actually not just for us as Vitendo for Africa, but many immigrant service providers providing those networks and connections of what they need to be able to survive and build their capacity. Personally, I would say for us, St. Louis Mosaic Project has been able to be great resource in terms of connecting us, even when it comes to like connecting. I mean, good example is I wanted to understand more about the political and the dynamics of St. Louis, and I have not lived it long enough to build those networks. So Betsy nominated me to a program called Focus Leadership that kind of opened up actually my eye and understanding about the St. Louis, not just from the perspective of an immigrant, but also in local politics and local economic development dynamics. And through that, we've been able to also to, just as an example, even just when it comes to leadership or nomination for different awards, Betsy and St. Louis Mosaic Project helps actually to guide a small organization, grassroots organization like us to connect to the right channel, to connect to the right partners. And I think because of that connections, we've been able to grow as an organization. And not just for us as an organization, but we're able to attract more immigrants who are also coming from other states and from other countries coming to settle here, and helping also to be more, help them to be more economically productive within a very short period of time. So in the end, you find that it's a mutual benefit, not just us as an organization, but also as a region. There is a lot of them that they're able to gain in terms of getting new talents. At the same time, getting people who also to be able to start business and connect and start paying taxes and create more jobs. So there is all that benefits that comes in when all these entities are able to work together.
Great. Well, in both of those stories, I mean, I heard from Jeremy that there was access to resources that were created that, you know, nobody knew there was going to be a pandemic, but showed up. And then, you know, these connections to networks and partners is another way in which being tied to someone like an economic development agency can leverage economic welcoming work. What kind of challenges have you guys experienced? And I really open this up to the four of you in relationships between broader welcoming initiatives or immigrant serving organizations and economic development agencies, which tend to have their roots in big business and, you know, corporate and government leadership.
Probably maybe my part I would say is people who have bigger power, bigger influence on making key decisions about things that contribute on economic development, not being able to understand the value or the value that immigrants bring into the region. If somebody is in a position in power and is not very well versed about how and the importance of these immigrants and refugees coming to the region. And they kind of make the process a little bit harder, making it not easy for organizations that are really advocating and pushing for resources and opportunity to get these people settled. And meaning that if they're well equipped and they're well versed with the resources, they are quickly able to start being productive within a very short time. And if key people that are not in that position, and I'm glad that in our region, Betsy is able to sit down and negotiate that, have those conversations. So I find it can be a challenge even for such organization with great interest, great interest, and great idea not being able to implement because of that misunderstanding or lack of information of people who are making the key decisions.
Yeah, I would build on that. And it's a little bit like Jeremy said, you need somebody who understands the benefit on all sides. And if it takes a long time to figure those benefits out, then momentum can be lost. And if you have someone that, and sometimes I think we're in the middle as Mosaic, we're part of an economic group, but we're often the broker middleman between organizations and big other chambers, economics, businesses, companies. But my view is that it helps if I can start with the economics and or where that business or chamber or government entity, what's important to them. And then I can point out what's important that they connect with Vitendo or that they connect with our Hispanic organization. So all of it is having that translation of the languages. And again, I'll give you one example just today, last day or two, that Jeffrey is trying to connect with one of our largest banks in town. And so he reached out to me, and I know the people there. I know some of their key priorities. And so I can make that happen in a way that if he just sent some email to somebody, it just wouldn't happen. But because there's kind of knowledgeable actors in town who can bridge that, we can make those introductions happen quickly with the right levels, with the right language. And that's something that really will bring benefit. I will also say that it's allowed us, we host meetings at our location for Vitendo for Africa and other things like that, where, we can fill in when they don't have what they maybe need and elevate what's right for all of us. But I think that finding the economic language, and I would encourage you, the New American Economy has great data that is available on the local level. And when that shows you population numbers, tax numbers, all those things that the benefits that our foreign-born community brings, then you can help people understand what's in it. I will add, we also just had our city just is working on an equitable development plan, and when I read it, it really didn't address. We have a lot of kind of black-white discussions in St. Louis, but the word immigrant wasn't there, and so in the draft, I was able to then bring some information to include the breadth that also will include our foreign-born immigrant ethnic communities that were intended to be in there, but no one said it. And so I think that that's where you need someone who can translate.
That's a really important point, Betsy. And I think sometimes we don't think enough about how much the immigrant perspective adds value to those in the economic development space. And sometimes folks, do business as they've always done business and miss this opportunity as they're doing new strategic plans, as they're launching talent initiatives, as they're thinking about entrepreneurship, as they're thinking about startups, all kinds of different opportunities that economic welcoming can bring to them. Jeremy, I know that I know that in the early days for the URA, like it was a new experience to work with a partner like Welcoming Pittsburgh. And I wonder if you can add some of the challenges that you experience or that you see that economic development agencies sometimes face in trying to be supportive.
Yeah, it was a little weird because it had felt like uncharted territory for us, even though Welcoming Pittsburgh was still under city government. So metaphorically, a couple of doors down. But similar to kind of what Jeffrey and Betsy was talking about is talking the language was what we were trying to bridge. And so on my side, it was about numbers and finances and very quantitative metrics that we were always talking about. And so I think the challenge, but also a great opportunity for like me and my team and Faye and her team was to try and bridge that and say, you know, our administration is really focused on numbers and in budgets and taxes, and helping and to translate that from what the Welcoming Pittsburgh and Welcoming America side to say, well, if we're worried about taxes, immigrants bring the tax base. If we're worried about city declining in population, which we have struggled with for a long time, you know, immigrant communities can help stabilize our population. So the more we've tried to bridge those concepts, the more success we're able to get more buy-in from our administration, and the more we were able to do that, the more smooth the process felt and the more projects we could do with Welcoming Pittsburgh. And it really took off from there once we were both able to figure out, it's a translation issue. So that was kind of one of the ways we worked through that.
I would add that one of the places where the translation is easier is when you get with the chambers. And that's interesting because Jeffrey has also been a leader in our African Chamber of Commerce. And we're now seeing gatherings where all of our different chambers are Asian American, Hispanic, African. We're starting a new Afghan Chamber of Commerce. They all came together this week to help start a new Afghan Chamber of Commerce with our mainline Chamber of Commerce, and our Black Heartland Chamber of Commerce is involved. So that's also another place where you can start to bring these communities into closer alignment, and then from there get more learning about some of the other cultural and educational societal impacts that our different communities can add.
Not seeing any questions in the chat. Just want to remind our audience that please put any questions in the chat. We've got about 10 more minutes before we're going to start heading towards breakout rooms. I know, Betsy, we just touched upon one aspect for why should chambers of commerce and why should economic development agencies care about immigrant inclusion. And I know when I sit down with a group, be it a chamber or an economic development agency or something like that, I like to start with asking them what their goals are and then talk through why immigrant inclusion is sort of almost like that, you know, what is it, lighter, cheaper, faster, whatever, you know, that inclusion goal can really speak to what they're already up to and help them get there.
We saw that when CARES money had to be distributed, they needed ways to reach all of our community. And so again, to fulfill things, they needed pipelines to let people know what was available. And so I think to your point, what those goals are, and then saying, if you're missing 5 or 10 or 13%, 20%, you know, you can't fulfill your goal.
Mm-hmm. We just had that experience here in Michigan, where we were working on, the governor put together an amazing poverty task force and wrote a beautiful report, but didn't, in the first draft, the University of Michigan wrote the report and never once mentioned immigrant children, who are now 1 in 5 kids in poverty in Michigan come from an immigrant family. And it just created all kinds of new opportunities for that task force to really move the needle on the issue that they care about by being a little more inclusive. Faye, do you see that in some parts of other parts of city government, and how your office partners?
Yeah, definitely. I always kind of see our work as both internal and external facing, right? I'm sure like my counterparts would too across the country, right? Internal is how do you help? I mean, the city's over 200 years old, and it's just a few years ago, right, that Welcoming Pittsburgh came into the picture. So he's having to undo things that have been in place for decades, right, of years. So working internally within city departments and helping to talk about, okay, so yeah, you have this program, you have this service, but does it really need to be structured in this way? I mean, to go back to the pilot program that we had with Jeremy. So again, COVID hit, and then we had to kind of reshift the kind of strategy that we actually came up with in the pilot program. And now we're providing rental assistance. Now, I remember, you know, Jeremy and Vithana would come on our Welcoming Pittsburgh calls to kind of talk to our communities. We brought together on a weekly basis at that time. Now it's monthly, our service providers, our immigrant leaders, and just folks to get updates continuously from government, because we knew that, of course, the immigrant and refugee community tended to be left behind. So we wanted to be intentional when COVID was coming about, that they were kept up to date on the progress and what things were going on in the landscape of the city and in the country at that time. And so we would bring Jeremy on. And so when people, just for him to introduce himself, to build a relationship with community members. And I remember offline when people would say like, okay, we just applied, but there are some issues here. Could you help us with this? And what was great is, so there was a set structure in place, but sometimes those structures don't always work for community members that you actually want to serve, right? So what was great about Jeremy and his team was, when people would contact me, we would have an offline conversation on, well, what are the ways we need to massage this? Yeah, you need this, but is this the medium in which you need to get this? Is there another way that we could get it? So yeah, we had those challenges, but when you have partners such as the URA, or with Jeremy specifically, because now Jeremy is gone, but what's great is we have other partners in the URA that we're still working with now, even till date, that when you build that relationship, you kind of talk through, well, let's go through the processes here, right? And here's where there is the issue with the immigrant community. How can we talk about this? How can we address this? What are the things that we need to do to advocate for policies that would be more intentional about making sure immigrants and refugees are able to take advantage of programs and services, especially if that's what we're aiming to do as local government or as the Urban Redevelopment Authority, that we want to serve people. Well, to actually do that, we have to realize that some of the policies that we have in place actually restrict people, and we need to be intentional about addressing those.
And Steve, if I can add an example to what Faye was talking about real quick, one of those conversations that she was talking about, having those offline conversations about problems, led to a pretty significant policy change of the main rental assistance program that we operated, where it was in stark contrast to our county program, because the issues that Faye brought to our attention around qualifications and eligibility for the rental relief funds. There was some confusion about residency, citizenship, needing to provide birth certificates, social security cards, and things like that. And after some of the conversations with Faye, we took a hard look and scrapped everything that absolutely was not necessary in terms of eligibility, to make it transparently clear of what was required and what wasn't, and citizenship being clearly not required for something like rental assistance was very important for us to make clear. And Faye and her team helped us translate, or not really translate, but get that message out to the community. And I think just those conversations leading to that policy change really made a difference in the number of immigrant households we were able to serve.
So it helped you with your numbers, and it also probably made the process simpler for everybody, really.
Yep.
Jeffrey and the others can certainly join in, but I know, as Betsy said, you are, you have your relationship with Betsy, but you're talking to others at Chambers of Commerce and in the economic development space. And I'm just wanted to know, what are the messages, the tools, or the data that you use in trying to get them to partner? How do you make your pitch to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what I'll say on that is that when they're working with the immigrants, you find that you're more effective when you're able to collaborate with different agencies, because some of the challenges you're going through, you're facing the same challenges. So I find it easier when, especially when we work with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. It's very well established in St. Louis and has been in business for a long time. So building those relationships and tapping to the programs or the network that they have already established work better for us. And we will be able to have meetings. We have had a couple of meetings with the president, just to understand some of the logistics on how they've been in the business, and how they've been able to operate and build some partnerships with different corporate sponsorship. And along the way, we have also realized that when it comes to the business, the challenges our businesses are facing the same thing, maybe the Hispanic are facing. So bringing those conversations together helps also to address some of the challenges they face, and maybe building a force that help them to advocate for themselves as a strong force, as opposed to just going alone when you know that maybe the challenge may not be that easy when you're alone. But when you build those networks and bring a bigger force, you become more strong, and you're more able to attract get the attention of maybe the policymakers and issue maybe also in the local government that is affecting small businesses, but also helping to work with small businesses in a way that they're able to also advocate for themselves. They know their rights. They know how to help each other. So it works better for us to work with, like Betsy said, there was a forum we had just the other day that brings all these small business, non-profit, the Chamber of Commerce. You invite people to come and talk to them. They will be able to talk about how do you board governance and all those kind of stuff. Because you realize that many of them, especially like now we're trying to build the African Chamber of Commerce, we have an Afghanistan Chamber of Commerce. They need some little advice, small guidance when they're very small. And instead of just doing one small at a time, you're able to bring them together and you're able to help each other. Maybe even using resources together as opposed to just being it by yourself.
I would say, Jeffrey, you also have a growing population number that you talk about with our African community, which is one of our growing populations. And
yes.
that's some of the data that I know you use.
Yeah, and I think also to mention that is also just talking about using live examples of like that we had one guy, we were just helping him. He wanted a side business, trucking business, and we were able to guide him register the business, connected him to some business loans, and he was able to kick off the business. And in the span of 3-4 years, now he have over 30 fleet of cars and employed a bunch of people, but I think 33 people that he's working with. So using those examples, showing that how much many of these businesses are doing, it helps also for them to get the attention, to listen to you and see how they can be able to be part of your stories. The other thing that we also do is help ask the immigrants to share their stories. We created a platform called the Building Momentum Speaker Series, which we actually kicked up at St. Louis Mosaic Project. And we invite all these successful businesses, individuals, and professionals to come and talk about their stories and use their examples to reflect the bigger population of our community.
Great. I know Global Detroit, like we originally started in the chamber, but we see the economic development community as a core audience. And so it's an ongoing effort to get the message across. I would say we've recruited board members to our organization whose name, resume, and dwell in the economic development business leadership space. We spend time going to their events and being a part of their community. And from a communication standpoint, which I know, really Betsy is an expert at, we really think about the Business Journal, Crane's Detroit Business, and other mechanisms for where we're trying to communicate stories that really touch that community. Anything else to add before we go to break? So what we're going to do is we're going to have I'm going to turn over to George. He's going to take us to breakout rooms, but in these breakout rooms is really an opportunity for each of you to talk about what is going on in your community. And that way we all can learn really from the pulse around the country of what's going on in economic welcoming, connecting with economic development agencies, chambers, et cetera, but also for you to ask questions, give each other ideas, talk about challenges that you're facing. So, enough of a group of experts or really peers, but you're all experts too, talking about this issue. Let's hear from you and let's get into dialogue together. So I'm going to turn over to Jeremy to take us to the breakout.
Welcome back, everyone. So thank you so much for diving deeply into discussions and answering some of the questions that our facilitators have put together, and really just wanted to hear from you about. I guess the next thing that we'll be doing actually, before we kind of close out our breakout group discussions, we'll be hearing from each of the facilitators just a quick, theme or point within the conversation that came up that stood out and that kind of summarizes the discussion that you all had. So I can go ahead and start with Molly.
Hi, all. I was joined in my group by Betsy, from St. Louis Mosaic Project, from Alan from the city of Pittsburgh, and also Fatima from Salt Lake, as well as an intern that is working with her in the office. And so, oh, and I'm sorry, and Ricardo from Gunnison. Gosh, dude, I'm sorry. It was really great to have all the folks in the breakout room, actually from city government. It was a really interesting conversation for us to talk about the ways in which city governments can participate in that trusted connector kind of space that we talked a lot about here, like who can go out on a limb and like very individually like vouch for a specific candidate, and how do we make connections for folks to get them into workforce while also continuing to make the case for broader inclusion in the economic development ecosystem in our communities. And so we made some great connections. We talked about a refugee job fair coming up, and we talked about some of the other work that folks are doing. So I want to set us off on a with brevity. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to the next. But we can talk more if we end up with more time.
Thank you so much, Molly. Next, we'll hand it over to Jordan.
Oh, I was hoping I wouldn't have to go after Molly, who remembered the names and organizations of every single person in her group. But our group was better, so I'm sure that's true. So we spent some time talking about outstanding questions that folks still have and challenges. Specifically, we had a discussion about channels. What kind of channels do you use to reach immigrants? So whether that's WhatsApp, or Jeffrey talked about a network, a provider network, going to local events that are happening, even with the school system. And then somebody brought up a great question about how do you what resistance have we seen, and how do you kind of deal with folks that are resistant to immigrants coming, and how do you and how do you use economic impact to soften that resistance that they might have? And so we talked through some different approaches, from changing the narrative and other things as well. So lots of questions from our group, and definitely not enough time to finish the discussion.
Thank you, Jordan. Next, we'll hand it over to Olivia.
Okay, so we had Peter, Will, and Todd from Salt Lake City. They all work on ARPA funding, program managers. We also had Faye and Karen Flippy from the state of Michigan. We had a pretty interesting conversation around trust building and how to conduct meaningful outreach, who the key partners are that maybe haven't always been at the table. And then, of course, because we had so many folks who are dealing with a really complicated government funding program, we got a little off base, not off topic, it was interesting, but talked about how to navigate complicated government forms, how to make sure that resources are available for everyone, and how to do good plain language outreach. And although we didn't solve it today, I think if we had another 5 minutes, we definitely would have, George. So we're really close.
Thanks, Olivia. And then finally, we'll hand it over to Steve.
Great. Well, I'm going to challenge Jordan. I think we have the best group. In addition to Jeremy and myself, we had Art Feltman from International Hartford, Jenna White, who works in Gainesville, Hamza from the Grand Forks, North Dakota Mayor's Office, and Asma, who's an intern at the Mayor's Office in Nashua, New Hampshire. So we had some people who were very new to the whole welcoming movement and came to hear more about economic development. But we got into some discussions about how sometimes some of our friends in the economic development community kind of have a vision for the ideal candidate that they're looking for, which is sort of a younger college graduate with a STEM major, science, technology, engineering, mathematics major, maybe an entrepreneur, maybe not. They may even be really eager to have African Americans included, but sometimes not feeling so much people with an international background. And what does that mean? And Grand Forks, North Dakota has kind of gone through some things in there. Seems like they're, with the current mayor, they're ready to engage again on helping the foreign born. And so we didn't get into the answers so much as we recognize that occasionally we know that inclusion is the superior growth model. There, I got it right this time. Equity is the superior growth model. But that the numbers usually underscore our arguments, but data sometimes doesn't make a difference for some of those folks. And we can sort of put them underwater with data, and it doesn't seem to make a difference. We didn't get to the solutions. We just recognized that problem before we ran out of time. So great discussion, and great to have some new folks within our community.
Great. Thank you all so much. I know it's really hard to summarize, just a few sentences, the full breadth of your conversations with everyone. So thank you all so much for really coming to these conversations with your thoughts, with questions that you all might have. To close this out, I'm going to be sharing some resources and kind of next steps for you all. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. Because you registered, we will be able to use your registration email to send you the slides, the recording, and any additional materials that have come up in this webinar. So let me move into our resources for you all. So as you all know, and because you're here, we are hosting a Welcoming Economies webinar series. So this is technically the first of the series. We had our 101 in April, which kind of counted as a precursor. In July, we will be covering workforce development for working class immigrants. In August, the topic is assisting immigrant women in economic inclusion. September is skilled immigrant integration programs. October is building immigrant inclusion in your region's small business ecosystem. November will be models of immigrant small business support. And finally, December, as we close out the series, will be on financial empowerment programs for immigrants and refugees. So if you'd like to find more of the resources that we will be covering, we've covered, you can check out our resource library. I'm sharing the link in the chat right now. And feel free to type into the search bar any of the titles that we list that have been discussed, including some of these, which are Seeds of Growth tool, which was written by Steve Bachman and the Welcoming America team. You can also check out the Guide to Immigrant Economic Development, also written by Steve Bachman. It's an encyclopedia of related programs and strategies. One program that's coming up, the application will be opening up later on this year, is our Gateways for Growth program. It's a competitive opportunity for public and private sector organizations to jointly apply for up to 2 tiers of support that help facilitate local immigrant integration and inclusion. That includes customized economic research reports on local immigrant contributions, tailored technical assistance that helps create welcoming plans in local communities. I'll pass it to Steve to kind of speak more on some of these resources.
Sure. So George touched, but that Guide to Immigrant Economic Development is kind of got chapters on various topics. It's a little outdated. And so a few of the chapters, I think 4 or 5 of the chapters, are updated in the Welcoming Economies playbook. Both of those are available at the Welcome America website, as George already covered. And then finally, this is not, unless you subscribe to the International Economic Development Council, which is kind of the National Trade Association for Economic Development, their economic development journey from winter 2021 is an article really written for economic development organizations about why they should be including immigrant business owners. So it's kind of inclusion around entrepreneurship for the space, but written in their journal for economic developers. If you need a copy of that, I can send you a copy. Just email me. I'm Steve at globaldetroit.mi.org. And do we have the Map the Impact website on here? I don't think we do. But one thing is that related to the gateways for growth is everywhere in the country, it may be your metro, it may be your state, maybe your congressional district. But if you go to maptheimpact.org, and I apologize for not, I'll put it in the chat for not putting it, I'll put both my email and maptheimpact.org in the chat. This is the maptheimpact.org resource is by what was the New American Economy. It's now part of the American Immigration Council. And you can look by your own community and find those economic contribution numbers. So that's a great resource if you are just one person or you don't work in the economic development space and you want to have an initial conversation with folks in your economic development, your chamber community, and you want to talk about what kind of economic impact immigrants in your community have. It's a really easy, hopefully within 15 minutes, you can get a nice little report for your community. And again, if you're talking to an economic development agency about immigrant business owners, contact me and I can send you this economic development journal article.
Thank you, Steve. And then finally, we will be sending out a link to a survey that you all can use to provide us with some feedback on how we can improve your webinar experience. Please share any thoughts, comments that you all have. We very much welcome your feedback and would love to know how we can create great webinars for you all. So with that in mind, please stay in touch. Make sure to reach out to any of your network points of contact for more information. We will be following up with all of these materials. And we really thank you all for joining us today. And we hope that we get to see you next month for our next webinar.
Thanks so much to Jeffrey, to Betsy, to Faya, and to Jeremy. We really appreciate you guys spending time with us today.
Thank you.
Bob.
And
Have a great
Thank
day.
you, guys.
George is an awesome organizer. So thanks, George.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, guys.
Enjoy your vacation.
All right.
Bye.